Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight on episode 39, season 3 of the Standoff with Brad and Richie here on New Zealand Sport Radio. We're here live every Wednesday on Facebook throughout the World Cup. Tonight's our season finale and also our 99th episode. So I'll bring Richie on. Evening, Richie. The World Cup's now over and there were some reasonably entertaining matches on the weekend in the finals. But first of all, how was your weekend and what did you think of those matches?
The weekend was good, Brad. None of the matches really produced a result I was after, unfortunately. Enjoyable to watch nonetheless, but you're right, it's last episode of the season tonight, so a little bittersweet. We get to chat some footy, but then we're forced to take a break for a while.
Yeah, and due to the longer season next year, it's not as long a break as it was last year. Obviously, the World Cup pushed us out a bit too, but been quite a few weeks this year. But while we're here on Wednesdays, you can also catch our show at your convenience on iHeartRadio. Just remember to search for New Zealand Sport Radio. As always, we're going to cover everything you need to know in the week that was rugby league, including our top stories of the week, a review of the 3 finals matches. We'll then stop and answer some questions from you guys as well as some questions we got for each other. And then we'll end the night wrapping up our 2022 season thoughts. So it should be a good chat, and remember to send us comments and questions throughout the show. See Mikey's here. Evening, Mikey.
Hey, Mikey.
We may as well just jump straight into the stories, Richie.
Sure, mate.
We'll start with a bit of Samoan love. Samoan coach Matt Parrish has confirmed that him and Christian Wolf have been discussing playing matches between Tonga and Samoa in both countries, in both Tonga and Samoa, saying that, it's clear. Yes, sorry, Paul. What's your thoughts on that? He was basically saying that the support that both countries give their sides is fantastic, and it would be great to actually take games back to the islands. I think it'd be a great idea. You've been to Samoa, I've been to Tonga, so I can say from the Tonga, it's a lovely place to go to. I'll let you talk about Samoa, but what's your thoughts on them taking it back to the islands?
Also a lovely place to go to. It would be fantastic if they could logistically get that over the line. I think they'd get a ton of support from in either island. So it'd be awesome to see, wouldn't it? See them give back to a couple of islands which have given so much to the game over the past few years and had unbelievable amount of support.
Yeah, and Paul's just put a question up saying when would they fit the games in, which kind of goes into another bit of news I had. They spoke with Junior Bolo, for the Samoan captain, and he's called for more international fixtures each year. He said that despite the busy schedule, they need to keep it up because it's clear the fans love it. So it is very tight. There's so much footy that they try to squeeze in. But like what Paul said there, imagine the holiday tours you could have. Yeah, there's so many money-making factors you could do. You could get Kiwis and Aussies going on like a tiki tour through the islands, watching the footy and all that. I think it'd be great. It's just trying to fit it in somewhere, but it does need to happen, as Junior has said. What's your thoughts on that?
I would love for it to be the case. Logistically, it's just where to fit it in. Like you've already said, the NRL season does eat up a lot of the year. That's where it differs from things like Super Rugby over in the other code. So fitting it in makes a bit of a challenge, but would love to see more international games. Obviously, you and I have always been big advocates for the international game, and you do get great support, particularly with your island nations, Samoa, Tonga. It'd be great to see a lot of these quality players get more rep games under their belt and not just have that saved for state of origin.
Yeah, and Simon's kind of said he doesn't want to have to say it, but he thinks the islands won't be able to actually be able to manage and host the matches. That could be a bit of a case too. I haven't got to go to I didn't go to the stadium in Tonga, but they've hosted games at Mount Smart before. they could make it work for a one-off. I really don't know. I'm sure there needs to be a lot more discussions when it comes to making it work. I just think it would be good to happen. And yeah, Paul's mentioned that they had Super Rugby games in Samoa. So I believe they could make it work. It's just going to need a bit of time to actually get it all together. But I'll continue with the Samoa news. We've got other stuff too. But the International Rugby League are rumored to be considering promoting Samoa and Tonga to Tier 1 nations, which would restrict several players from playing State of Origin. I know I talked about it last week, saying that there's more than just performing well internationally that makes you a Tier 1 nation. It all goes to your grounds roots. But it looks like International Rugby League didn't want to listen to me, Richie. So despite that, multiple Samoan players have actually pledged their allegiance to Samoa moving forward, saying that even if that happened, they would rather play for Samoa. So what's your take? Do you think Origin's going to start making some extra rule changes? I know Fittler was a fan of it, mainly because of all the Samoans in his team. But what do you reckon is going to happen if the International Rugby League Board move forward with this?
I don't know about Tonga and Samoa being promoted to Tier 1 based off... I thought there was other factors involved, such as having a domestic competition and all that kind of jazz as well. I can understand from a performance point of view where since last World Cup, the Pacific Islands have been on the rise and have actually started challenging and beating the bigger teams. So, yeah, I'm not sure, mate. I don't know the answer, to be fair. The eligibility thing has always been such a grey area in league, but I kind of think that Samoan and Tongan players should be able to play Origin as well, as long as they... a lot of the players that do are either born or have lived in
Australia,
New South Wales
forever,
or Queensland since they were young kids, or either that or born there. So really they're Australians as well, representing their heritage. So
yeah. And Simon said that Samoa and Tonga getting Tier 1 structures potentially a liability for them. I think it is, because as much as some of those Samoan players are saying they'll stick with Samoa, the ones that know they're going to be regular Origin players might leave those teams, and then you've got a Tonga and Samoa team that hasn't got the star power that it does, and then you've got a Tier 1 nation that maybe isn't quite up to scratch anymore, and then what do? Do you push them back down, and then they get strong again because all those players go back? I don't know.
Yeah, you end up with it being just Australia and New Zealand, the good international teams, if you take a lot of those Samoan players out. But yeah, it's a funny one, mate. But I don't think it has to be much different from the way it is. They should be promoting the international game, in my opinion. Maybe it's just because I'm not from Australia and I support New South Wales, but it's not do or die for me, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul. England as well, mate. England as well, Paul.
England couldn't even beat a Tier 2 nation, Paul. So,
well, they got one each.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
they do. But yeah, we'll keep going on. That was all the Samoa news. I kind of compacted it together. Other than the last part was the big turnout for the Samoan players at the airport in Australia. Was great to see. We're kind of used to it with what we've seen at World Cups in New Zealand and everything in New Zealand when it comes to the Tongan community and the Samoan community. But I think for a lot of those Australian-born Samoan players, that might have been a bit of a new experience because basically they've all played for Samoa in the UK. So they haven't got to be around where a lot of the Samoans are actually living. So they all look pretty chuffed at the airport. You know, they would be disappointed that they lost the game we're going to talk about in a bit. But seeing that support there, it was just great. I think I even used one of the pictures of all the fans on our promo for today. But yeah, great to see the support for them. But we'll get her back into NRL and NRLW news for a bit. Scott Prince has been announced as the Broncos NRLW head coach for 2023. Obviously, a great player in his own game. Has had been doing a lot of coaching in the previous years, and the Broncos, I think they kind of needed a change after they lost some key players. They kind of fell off the wayside. But yeah, maybe he's the boost in the arm they need. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it was a tough season for the Broncos, the NRLW side, especially given the success that they've been used to. So I think it's a good change. Scott Prince, premiership winner in his days with the Tigers, but also Queensland representative and Kangaroos representative, and very good footy brain. So definitely couldn't hurt to have somebody of his caliber in there helping with their setup.
Yep, definitely. And with more rumours, we have Dylan Brown. We like to talk about him every couple of weeks.
Yep.
But he's got a lot of suitors for his next contract. But he's actually come out and said that what's best for his family is going to be the deciding factor in what happens. And a lot of pundits across the ditch have basically already said that they're pretty confident he's going to remain with the Eels, but that Mitch Moses is most likely on the way out. But what's your take on that? I know we've been talking and joking about him, Dylan Brown, being a Warrior. We always kind of knew that wouldn't happen, but
hey, who was joking? I'm not joking. He showed his hand. He wore the jersey.
He wore the jersey. What's your take? I kind of always felt he was going to stay at the Eels. In my heart, it felt like that's a good fit for him. They seem to kind of go up to another level when he's there, and they're not going to want to lose both Brown and Moses. So they're going to pick one of those players and stick with them. So I'm pretty sure we're going to, and Mikey said Moses to Tigers. I do feel that's where Moses is going to head, which means, I think they'll throw more than enough money at Brown to make sure he stays at Parramatta.
I heard the Dogs might be chasing Moses as well. But I think Dylan Brown is obviously I think he enjoys it there at Parra, and he's come up there for a few years now. So it's a shame if Moses were to go, to be fair. I think Brown and Moses make a nice combination, and when they're playing together, they bounce off each other quite well. But Dylan Brown keeps going. He's still only very young, in his early 20s, and he keeps going to higher levels. He went up a gear this season, and during the World Cup, I thought he's one of the Kiwis' better players.
It would be hard. It would be hard for Mitch Moses to be a flat track bully at the Tigers as well. So
absolutely.
But next bit of news, we had Cooper Johns. He signed a 1-year deal with the Seagulls. The Storm moved him on. I think it's a handy signing. I think he's got a lot of talent, comes from some good stock as well, which
pretty
helps.
Handy stock.
And just wasn't really getting those opportunities at Melbourne due to the sheer talent that was ahead of him. And Seagulls, they kind of have a spot opening up in the halves. I know Josh Schuster is pushing to be the 5'8" there. But if Cooper shows that he's got the edge, he should get that spot ahead of him. Which, Schuster might have that as a negative against him, the fact that he can play multiple positions. They might say, well, Cooper's playing really well. We're going to move him into the halves and we'll push you back out into the forwards. That's all speculation on my part, but I think it's a handy signing for sure for Manly.
It is, and I don't think Schuster, when he's had his opportunities, he's had flashes, but not quite grabbed the ball by the horns completely. And he's still only young. He has a lot of upside, but he's probably got to work on the downside in his game as well. But with Foran leaving, I think Cooper Johns is a good signing just in case the halves pairing's not working, and he's another good option they can try, who's come from a good setup.
Yeah. And Schuster, to his credit, and he came back into training earlier pre-season, has been really working on dropping some weight. and apparently has been doing really well with that. So, hope he does really well. As long as it's not against the Warriors. But as Manly seem to have become my second team, I'm all for seeing them develop really well. But we'll go to the next bit. It's a bit interesting. The Broncos have reportedly told Tessie New that he is free to negotiate with rival clubs and leave before the 2023 season kicks off. So sounds like Reece Walsh is showing more promise in the preseason, I would assume. There was a lot of big talk before preseason started that Reece is going to have to earn that fullback spot because guys like Tessie New and that have shown that they're, up to the challenge, and it was really Reece's job to take it off them. And so it's gone from talking like that to telling him if he wants to leave, he can. Don't know if that's just he's not performing at preseason or there's attitude problems, or they've just decided that, they're going to put all the money on Reece. I'm not sure. What's your take on it? And where do you think he would go? I know the Dolphins were interested.
I think that'd be a decent, but I think that would be a decent shout. They're definitely looking for backs over there, and it's not such a massive move. It's same city. I'm not too sure what kind of promise Walsh has shown in preseason, whether that's linked. If he is, maybe they haven't been doing many drills that involve defense.
No, it's all fitness and stuff right now, right?
Yeah, it's all the stuff he's good at.
But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, by the time we do our first show in the preseason next year, we'll either know where he's gone or if he's staying. So we'll talk about it more then. But we just talked about Walsh, so we'll talk about another former Warrior. Dejan Arce has signed a 2-year deal with the Eels. I know when he left the Warriors, he was with the Broncos for a little spell, like on a train and trial. But it's great to hear he's picked up a decent deal. I love him as a player. I was disappointed that the Warriors didn't offer him more, but I do also understand the reasonings. I might not agree with them, but I understand, how many halves and stuff they had. They didn't really have the room for another one. So I think it's a great deal for the Eels to pick him up, and hopefully he gets some game time. They've got some pretty handy halves there already, but if one of them's deciding to leave, it might change things a bit.
Yeah, exactly right, man. I was just going to say, if he sticks in there long enough, obviously he's got a 2-year deal. If Moses does find his way on the out after this season, then there's a spot up for grabs for Dejan. And if that's the case, I really hope he does. And it's always just an injury away as well. So I hope if he gets an opportunity there, I hope he really takes it, because I was having seen him come here, and I thought we probably underutilized him a little bit, and chopped him when he was in pretty good form that he showed. And yeah, I'm a fan of Dejan. I hope he goes well.
Definitely. And we've got a little bit about preseason and the Warriors, but before that, our friend of the show, Buzz Rothfield, has come out and declared that the Kangaroos are a better football side than the All Blacks. Thought it would just be an interesting conversation to have with you, the avid rugby supporter that you are. I could kind of agree with him on the All Blacks currently. They're not really been the powerhouse that they have before, but it's apples and oranges kind of deal.
It's a different sport. It's a stupid argument. It's like saying the New England Patriots are better than the bloody Wallabies, or the French football team, the French soccer team are better than the All Blacks. It's just, I know it's a little closer together, the two codes, but completely different. Horses for courses, union forwards completely different. Roles are all different. Game styles different. So
I think as well the opposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Australia, the Kangaroos have, 2 or 3 other teams that have the potential to beat them. Where, there's just so much competition in the International Rugby Union side of things that, any team can on their day go in there. And it's, I don't even know why I wanted to bring it up. I just wanted to see what you'd say.
You just wanted to wind me up.
Exactly. So interesting take from Buzz. I know he does. He's old now. Okay, it's. I don't know. He just wanted to make a conversation point, I guess. It's in the off season. You got to say something to keep yourself relevant, and that seemed to have done the trick. So we'll move on. The preseason matches have all been announced now. We talked a few weeks ago that they were looking at doing like a preseason challenge, and they've kind of done that, but it doesn't really seem like they've done anything special other than St. Helens are obviously coming down for the World Club Challenge, but they've actually got a game against the Dragons for some reason in the preseason of all teams to pick. They picked the Dragons. I don't know why. But the preseason games kick off on the Thursday, the 9th of February, with actually the Warriors playing the Tigers at Mount Smart. Then on the Friday, they have Knights, Sharks, Rabbitohs, Seagulls. Then the Saturday, they have Eels, Panthers, the Dragons, St. Helens game, and then the All-Stars men and women in Rotorua. Then Sunday, they have Storm, Roosters, Raiders, Bulldogs, Cowboys, Dolphins, and Broncos and Titans. And they've kind of called that the preseason challenge. They were kind of talking about it being a tournament, but it doesn't really seem like it because everyone's just playing one team. Like a normal preseason week. But then in the second week, we have Knights, Eels, Roosters, Seagulls, Dragons, Rabbitohs, the Panthers, St. Helens World Club Challenge, the Broncos and Cowboys, the Storm play the Warriors in Christchurch. Then we have Tigers, Raiders, Bulldogs, Sharks, and Dolphins, Titans. So there's a few good matchups in there, but it's preseason, you come to expect. And Simon's mentioned St. Helens, St. George, which team will have to change the color of their jersey. I assume it would be St. Helens because they're the visiting team. And Simon's also said tickets for the All-Star match in Rotorua will be available to the general public from 12 tomorrow. So I had a look at them. I got in advance as a Warriors member, and the prices aren't cheap, Richie. Had me second guessing. And a lot of tickets already gone. So it's going to be a quick sellout tomorrow. So I'll have a look again in the morning and hopefully get some tickets. But if you want to go, you definitely got to get them fast. So make sure you do. And then the last story I got is the Warriors, because we haven't talked about them yet. The Warriors players that are back at preseason have been out working non-footy jobs in various fields. They go to the gym in the morning for a workout from 5, and then the whole group went to Manukau to join Downer. And basically, I've got a quote here from the coach, old Webby. He said, "It gives them a chance to experience and respect what ordinary people do every day, as well as providing a deeper appreciation of the privileged existence they have as professional athletes. It's also a test of their resilience, getting up early to train, doing a full day's work, and then training again in the evening. It ticks a lot of boxes and also enables us to reconnect with our community after being in Australia." So there's 40 players and staff that are involved, and they'll split into 5 groups. I saw pictures. There was some doing like construction. Stacey Jones and Jazz Tavanga must be fan favorites of Webby because they got to work in the cafe and make coffees. And there was some doing like cones and all sorts. It's a new thing for the Warriors, I believe. I don't think they've done it that much before, but I know Melbourne Storm basically do it every year. With the new, basically every new recruit they get kind of goes through this process. I think it's kind of a win-win. It's good for the players to get a bit of an understanding. It's a bit of a win PR-wise as well. What's your takes on it? What do you think?
No, I think it's a cool idea. I think you're right. It ticks a lot of boxes, and I just would have liked to have maybe had a player or two thrown in my wagon with me and come to work with me. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I think they're trying to get them to do work that's actually challenging, to build some resilience in them. Besides making the cafe coffees, no disrespect to coffee makers out there, I couldn't do it, but yeah, I think it's great. And yeah, hopefully that bodes well for us next year, Richie.
Yeah,
So,
hopefully.
we'll move on to injuries. We really only had two. Chanel Harris-Tavita failed his HIA in the 46th minute of the final after getting an elbow to the face. We'll save to talk about that for the Naughty Boy Corner. And then Kiwi Fern Racine McGregor injured her wrist during the women's final, but stayed on. There's no word on if she's going to require any surgery. But full credit to her and what was a perfect example of a game where you could just say, I'm injured, I'm going off, to stick it out. And yeah, Chanel, not a great way for Chanel's potential last ever match to end. But what are your takes on the injuries there? Not a lot because we're in the off season now. So
yeah, exactly. Probably good timing. They can both now have a rest and recover over the off season. I did feel for Chanel that potentially being his last games, not the coolest way to finish. I'll just have my fingers crossed he has a bit of time away and then has a realization he misses the game greatly and wants to come back to the Warriors.
Fingers crossed. And that takes us into the Naughty Boy Corner, where Angus Crichton's received a 2-match ban for grade B reckless striking for raising his elbow against Chanel. He is rumoured to be looking at fighting it. There's no word on when it's actually going to happen because it's now off season. He has apologised to Chanel, and apparently they're going on a tiki tour around the UK together now, before Angus has to go back for training. What's your take on the elbow? And you know, he got a sin bin. Do you think it deserves 2 weeks? Do you think it should have been a red card?
Yeah, I think it definitely deserves some punishment. If you put the ball into Chanel's hand and it was Angus doing a bit of defensive work and he elbows him in the face, you get punished. It tends to get scrutinized more when it's the other way around for whatever reason. But I don't know if it was completely intentional, but yeah, like Mikey said, probably a reflex reaction, but it's still a raised elbow, whacked them in the side of the head and knocked them out. So can't be completely like void of punishment.
Yeah, I'm fine with the 2 weeks just on the fact that Adam Dwayhe, you know, got a week for you know, verbally saying something to the ref. So I 100% agree with Mikey. I think there was no intent in it. It was a reflex action. You know, Crichton, you know, he doesn't have the cleanest rap sheet, but he's not a Hargraves type of character either. So I have no issues when he says it was an accident and he apologized. And Chanel, you know, is a decent character, so he's accepted it and moved on like you should. There's no bad blood. But yeah, I think a week or 2 weeks, it'll be fine. They count it with the NRL's stupid system. They count it in preseason anyway, so it's not going to affect any actual competition games. So
yeah,
it's interesting to see that he bothered to fight it, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, unfortunate that it just happened to a player I admire and I wanted to see actually last the whole game. But that's it really. So we may as well jump into the 3 games we got. I'll let you take over since I took over this from you most of the World Cup.
All right. So the wheelchair tournament, we had England pipping France 28-24. A very close game, one of the closer games of the tournament, Brad. I know from the feedback you've given, you've loved the tournament so far. Sort of looking at the game prior to the game, I thought France might edge this one, but great for England to come out on top. And I thought very tense game, and think the tournament as a whole has been really entertaining.
Yeah. Came into this completely oblivious to wheelchair rugby, as we've discussed the last couple of weeks, and they've really gravitated towards the game. Love the final. It was probably the best. It was, in my hands down, the best game to watch for me of the finals out of the three. I had no horse in the race, which might have helped. And it was so close. And I basically, everyone I wanted to win lost this week. Spoilers for the others. I thought France were the most impressive team throughout, but England were also hitting up triple digits against teams as well. It was a nail-biting finish almost. But yeah, fantastic game. And I really hope this has put all the eyes they want onto it to hopefully grow it in other countries so we get more teams at the next World Cup. It'd be great to see a New Zealand team in there. And if that will happen, I'm not sure. But hopefully it shows more people what it is, and who knows what could happen, both internationally and if you ever saw a wheelchair version in Australia. We're not necessarily a whole NRL model, but, who knows if you could get players in Australia and New Zealand that want to play. I don't know. It's probably a long time away. I've just fallen in love with it. So
I'd love to jump into a chair, Brad, and just take you on one-on-one.
They move so fast. I can't remember his name. The young guy for England that came off the bench and he scored a nice try. He's super quick, and I don't understand how it works. I don't. Yeah, it's fantastic. But it's kind of lets everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a big bopper like myself or a little skinny mini. You can all go out there, and you're not going to completely bully people because you're too big or you're too slow.
It's definitely got its own kind of athleticism and coordination, eh? I mean,
yeah,
they've definitely got it down pat now. Like you say, very quick, but also agile and can turn really quickly on a dime. And some of the lines they wheel through are really impressive. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. A lot.
Yeah, fantastic game. But yeah, full credit goes to England. They kept their heads up. It looked like they were, going to lose it towards the end of the game, and they managed to come back and take it. So, yeah, fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yep, congrats, England. I probably enjoyed that game a lot more than this next one. The women's final, Australia 54, New Zealand 4. We were hopeful, Brad, before the game that the New Zealand team might have a decent chance, given how close the last game between the two nations was. It was a very close game. Didn't turn out to be that way. I know you were also a bit fearful that Australia might have a bit too much, and so it was the case. New Zealand never really in the race in this one, and Australia's big stars stood up, and the score blew out to not a very nice score if you're Kiwi supporters like us.
Yeah, I think we did talk about it last week, where the Kiwi Ferns lost by 2 in the final round of the round robin. So they could either win the game, lose by 2, or they could lose by what we saw, 50.
Yeah.
It's the fear I always have with Australian teams, men and women. One day they could go out there and have a tight tussle, and the next day they put a cricket score on. And that's what we saw here. They were just ready for it and never let the Kiwi Ferns in. The Kiwi Ferns were valiant. They didn't really let themselves down. It was just a better team, as cliche as that sounds. The Gillaroos were just far too good. And, Mikey said, in the shadow of the Black Ferns. It would have been great to see both girls' teams take glories. But at least we got one. And, Simon also mentioned about the World Cup. The next World Cup is going to use the same format with the 3 tournaments in 2025 in France. So I'm just hopeful that we get a few more nations into the wheelchair and the women's tournaments as well. So you got a few more teams. think it would be great. But yeah, well done to Australia, getting the honours here. I think I always kind of had them pegged as the World Cup winners before it started. And yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't a close game, but hopefully that gives some fuel to the fire for the Kiwi Ferns for the next time they play, and they can get some revenge.
Yeah, and absolutely. The next game was the men's final. Yeah, I want to pretend like it didn't happen, Brad. And we said pre-tournament, we did our pre-tournament picks. I think I was the only one that tipped Australia, given how good the Kiwis squad looked and how strong the island nations looked. But
you tipped them here, and Rue also backed you on the show that we did with Rue and Hammer.
Yes. It was the last result I wanted to see, but it's just like every other World Cup. I could feel it felt almost inevitable. Even with players defecting to other nations, to island nations, the squad just still looked like a squad full of winners. So as it turned out, Australia 30, Samoa 10. I thought it was a relatively brave effort from Samoa, given it's their first sort of cameo into a World Cup grand final.
Yeah.
I thought if a couple more things went their way from the start, we saw a 40-20 attempt where Tedesco stepped on the line towards the start of the game. I just felt like Samoa needed to get off to a good start and apply scoreboard pressure on Australia. Because
I just want to credit you there, Richie. It wasn't a 40-20 attempt. It was a 40-20. It
was a 40-20, yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you felt like Samoa needed to get off to a good start and apply some scoreboard pressure, because once Aussie get ahead, they're just so good from in front and very hard to run down. I mean, you have to get ahead and actually make them panic a little bit, but unfortunately, it wasn't the case.
Yeah, but they showed heart. They got points on the board when the game was over, but they got some points to make it look a bit more interesting. And 30-10 loss in the final isn't, you want to win, but that's not actually that bad. Most people in Oz were kind of predicting it was going to be a scoreline more like the women's tournament, and that Samoa would get put to the sword. And yeah, it wasn't the case. It was just, again, rinse and repeat what I said about the women. That Australian team is stacked, and they were just too good. And on the Rue and Hammer show, I came in full of huff and puff. I said New Zealand would make the final, and I did say that if Australia made the final, they would lose to Tonga or Samoa. So I was happy I got Australia versus Samoa there, but I didn't get the outcome. They just, as our show title suggests, who needs warm-up matches? Australia went in cold and never needed to. They never really got challenged, I would say.
Yeah.
Closest would have been the Kiwis game.
Kiwis challenged them. Yeah.
That was the only challenge, I would say. But even then, they still looked reasonably comfortable. Being behind, they never looked worried.
Yeah.
And it's just they're just too many good players there. It's just unfortunate. But yeah, congratulations to them. We're going to get the next one in France. It's going to be the Kiwis' time to shine. Hopefully, a lot of those Kangaroos players are retiring. Mikey mentioned, what about Munster vaping? Yeah, there was an image of Munster vaping in the changing rooms after the game, and he hasn't been in trouble like Kevin Proctor. I don't know if in the UK at the stadiums if they have a no smoking rule or not, like Australia does. So that might be it. And generally after a final, things like that kind of go out the window. And I think Proctor was more in trouble because it was during a game as well, not after a game. Like you see it in the NBA and everything when they win the championship, they're all smoking cigars and stuff in the changing rooms. I don't know. It's also Munster. Munster's a bit more protected anyway.
He does cocaine and nearly
gets and gets no punishment. So yeah. They're probably happy that it was a picture of him vaping instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, did you have anything else to add on that game before we move on, or?
Nah, other than I'm dirty on the result.
It was always going to happen. There was an Australian ref.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Okay, so that was the World Cup, and we'll go into the World Cup a little bit more in our questions anyway. But Paul, were there any other questions? Oh yeah, so Simon says St. Helens Rugby League ground is sponsored by a vaping company.
There you go.
Well. So, were there any other questions from the audience, Paul? I think he's trying to find some. Yes, no.
He's busy, mate.
Nope, covered stuff from the audience as we've gone on.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So we'll go with your one first, or my one to you first, because I think your one's a bit bigger.
Yep.
Mine was just, what's your best moment from the World Cup?
Again, for me, it was the Island Nations showing up to the party again. We saw it last World Cup. We saw it again this World Cup. I think the Samoa versus Tonga game was probably one of my biggest highlights from the World Cup. Seeing the challenges before the game, full of intensity but respectful as well. And then the game just full of brutality. But then Samoa beating England too in the semi-final to make their first grand final in Golden Point. That was probably my overall moment of the World Cup for me personally. But yeah, I think I could just sum it up by saying the Island Nations doing what they've done the past couple World Cups is fantastic for me. I'm not Australian. They'd probably say winning the cup, but I take no joy from that. I take no joy at all.
I'll go left field then. I kind of had the same answer as you, but I'll go with seeing Jamaica score their first try.
Yeah, that was cool.
Admittedly, I didn't like who it was against, but it was great to see. And just those little nations, everyone was talking about how much they were getting flogged and that they shouldn't be there, which I kind of understand that idea, but I feel it's disrespectful to those players because they're out there, busting their ass, doing what they can. It's not their fault that they're nowhere near Australia or New Zealand level. But seeing guys like Jamaica, are Jamaica ever going to be a powerhouse in rugby league? Most likely not. But, if they can keep doing what they're doing and growing, they could become a team that, if not competitive, at least enjoyable to watch, which we understand as Warriors fans. We just want to watch our team be entertaining. We know they're not going to win a lot of the time. Negativity from the season's still here. And yeah, Simon also said Greece scoring in the first trial was great as well. Yeah, and the story of Greece, there were so many of those little stories from those small nations that was just great. And then obviously my wheelchair infatuation. But yeah, your question for me now, because it's a bit bigger.
So my question to you was, do you think the World Cup was a success overall? How would you rate it, and for what reasons? Why?
Yeah, so before that, Simon's actually made a good point. He said the World Cup's not necessarily about the top teams. It's about a whole bunch of teams. If you want to watch the top teams, you do a tri-series.
Yeah.
But then the sport never grows. So yeah, I agree with that. You got to let those smaller nations have a bit of a taste. But yeah, your question, do I think it was a success and how would I rate it and why? I think it was a success. I know there was so many issues off the field and then the one-sided scores and things like that. But a lot more people, I think, down in the Southern Hemisphere were actually paying attention and watching it. We had people talking about the wheelchair form. People were discussing the women's game. It wasn't all just about the men competition. So on that note, I take it as a success. We saw teams like Samoa, get redemption and make upset teams and make the final. That was a success. Everyone was kind of putting it down before it started. It was going to be Australia, England, or Australia, Tonga, New Zealand, Australia. They kind of basically had written the script on what was going to happen. So to see a few upsets in there, I think it was good. Rating it, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. I think it was entertaining for me. I didn't like how much I had to pay to watch it. That's nothing to do with them. and I didn't like that the Kiwis didn't make the final. So I bring it down there. But yeah, overall, I thought it was good, and hopefully it gets better in France. I know I saw a lot of people saying they want it in the Southern Hemisphere again. I saw someone pushing that New Zealand should push to have it in 2029 as the sole hosts instead of sharing it with Australia. I think that would be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, France is a place where rugby league is actually trying to grow right now with the Super League and everything. So it seems like a good fit there. It just means early mornings again for us, unfortunately. But we've got a couple of years to get ready for it, so it'll be fine. But what about you? Did you think it was a success, and how would you rate it?
Yeah, I think overall it was. Obviously, there was a lot of some of the games in the earlier stages were relatively one sided, and maybe the crowds weren't completely chocker. But I think once the longer the tournament went on, and once they got to the knockout games, the games became a lot more competitive and um, exciting to watch. Uh, Disappointed, obviously, that the Kiwis didn't go all the way. But I also, in a sort of world stage tournament like that, look for some kind of way that it makes an impact. And I think, again, hate to sound like a broken record, but the island nations doing well again in Samoa, making the final, just seeing sort of in Australia, New Zealand, and Samoa, all the flags and the colours and the celebrations and the impact that had. So I think from that standpoint, it might not be a success in the same way that maybe a Rugby World Cup is, where you have multiple teams that could win it and every game's a sellout. But I think it has had its impact in its own way, just like the last World Cup did. So I think it's growing, and I hope it continues to grow.
Yeah. And yeah, Simon's put in there that the Kiwis, the New Zealand Rugby chairman of New Zealand Rugby Leagues, opposed to New Zealand being the host, saying it's not commercially viable in New Zealand, which is disappointing to hear. But I kind of get it. But it's we can agree to disagree. I guess he's the chairman for a reason. Compared to me sitting in my room here. And Paul's also asked, should there be a bowl or plate comp for teams that don't make the quarterfinals? Nah, that's a rugby union thing where everyone's a winner, League, there's only winners and losers, Paul. We're a bit more evolved from that. So, no, we don't even play for third place.
Brad with the if you're not first, you're last mentality.
100%. And you're only as good, only as good as your last as well. So, yeah. What do you think? Do you think they should do like even a playoff for third, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I was just going to say a playoff for third would have been cool because
New Zealand, Tonga.
New Zealand,
England.
Would have been New Zealand versus England. Yeah, which
right.
I would have woke up to watch that.
But yeah, and like Paul said, it would give the smaller nations more games. I can see that point. Like you could, while the big boys are playing in the quarters and that, you get those smaller nations getting some more competitive games. So there's reasoning behind your idea there, Paul. I'll give you credit where it's due. But yeah, I don't know. I suppose that it's just the length, how long the World Cup would be, and the extra cost. Maybe I'm not sure. The extra cost of having extra stadiums, but you could do it as warm-ups before the big games, I guess, at the same stadium. Yep. You can make it work. Put your thoughts down, Paul, and we'll send it to the International Rugby League and see what they say. But yeah, anything else you want to add before we move on, Richie?
No, I'm good, mate.
All right. So with no games to preview, and this being our last show for the season, I thought it'd be a good time to discuss our highs from season 3 of the standoff and have a quick glimpse at season 4. I'll let you start first with your highs for the year, Richie.
It was tough.
And your lows if you want to be negative.
It was tough thinking of highs from a Warriors fan point of view. So yeah, there was a couple of lows. The 70 points we conceded was definitely a low. But I think for me, probably the biggest highs were the homecoming games to Mount Smart. Unfortunately, I didn't get to be there in the flesh, but just to see Mount Smart again and the Warriors running out onto it, you know, it felt right. It got you feeling all kinds of feels if you're a diehard like yourself and I am, Brad. So seeing us come home to a full stadium and actually perform well, a couple of our best performances this year were at Mount Smart. So it goes to show over the COVID period what we've been missing, and that, you know, the home ground advantage can make you grow a bit of an arm and a leg. So yeah, that was one of my highs, definitely. And then just being on here every week with you guys chatting as well, added a lot to it as well.
Yeah, I kind of had the same. It was a hard season to get through as a Warriors fan, but doing this show each week definitely helped get through. It was our longest season to date as well, and we got so close to cracking the big 100 episodes. Kind of timed it perfectly to end before the 100th. And I just love being on here chatting footy with you, and can't wait to build the show bigger and better next year. And yeah, like Paul said, having a Wednesday therapy session. That's effectively what it was. Yep. Just a chance. It was kind of like when you lived in Auckland, Richie, and we would, you know, complain on the drive home from Mount Smart about what we just saw. Absolutely. So it was basically that. And yeah, a big thank you needs to go to you, Richie, for joining me every week. Paul, for keeping the engine running in the background. She never watches, but my partner for allowing me to spend countless hours watching footy and working on the show notes. And obviously everyone that, you know, watches and comments and that.
Yeah.
It's it's been a great year, a long year. We're usually resting by now. But yeah, looking forward to what the future brings. Feel like, hopefully we can do some good stuff. Obviously, season 4 will start in 2023, and the next show we do will be our 100th episode. Not really sure when it's going to be yet. We still haven't figured it out. We're still working on ideas on what we want to do for the big 100. But if you have any ideas, let us know. Paul's interested in how I'm going to make it bigger and better. I have no idea, Paul.
I think that next year, if anybody who watches and comments is in Auckland for one of the games, Brad said he's going to take us out and shout us beers before the game.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like something. I wouldn't even do that for you, Richie. Obviously, if you've got ideas on things you'd like us to do for the 100th, Paul thought we were going to have a big announcement. We just haven't had ideas yet on. Want to do something, Mike said, more positivity next year. I really hope so.
Yeah, big time.
That's kind of very reflective on how our Warriors team performs. But speaking of that too, we were meant to do a show at Raw and Hammer last week. Hammer was a bit crook, and unlike the standoff, when we're sick, we actually play on. He decided to have the week off. So we are now doing a show with them about the 2023 draw tomorrow night at 10 o'clock New Zealand time. Super soft. I know they're probably not watching right now, so I can say it, and I'll deny it tomorrow. But yeah, so if you want to watch us again, check in on their channel tomorrow. Season starts first week of March, so I assume we'll be back in February, Richie.
Yeah. Yep.
So it'll be out on social media well before then what we're going to do for our 100th. But then, a few weeks before round 1, we'll be back into our 2023 season, looking into the preseason games and looking forward to round one. And suntans and beach bods, Paul, they'll be all Richie.
That's that's how Bad's growing the show. He's going to do his shirt off special next year.
No. But yeah, anything else you want to add before we sign off for the last time in 2022?
No, just echoing your thoughts, Brad. Thanks for the year. It's been a pleasure chatting with you and Paul and everybody who's tuned in and commented. It's been great having some more people who like to watch the footy like us and have a yarn about it. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in tonight and joining us for the last standoff with Brad and Richie for 2022. Thank you again. Good night, everyone, and see you in 2023.